SLU International Business Now, Conversations That Matter is a podcast developed by the Boeing Institute of International Business and St. Louis University's Chaffetz School of Business. Special thanks to founder Dr. Sung Kim for his grant to support the launch of this podcast.
Welcome to St. Louis University International Business Now, Conversations That Matter. This is Todd Hovermale, and I am your host. For this episode, I had the opportunity to sit down with Dr. Paul Beamish, the founder of the 39 Country Initiative. The 39 Country Initiative aims to strengthen management education by improving access to quality teaching materials for faculty and students at local universities in the world's poorest countries. Paul was recently in St. Louis to receive the Global Service Leadership Award presented to him by the Boeing Institute of International Business, recognizing his work with the 39 Country Initiative. Here is our conversation. So, Paul, tell us the origin story of the 39 Country Initiative.
Yeah, as you mentioned, it started in 2010, and it was born out of some frustration that I had with the fact that, I would see people in other countries that I visited, and just how tough it was for them teaching in the poorest countries. And I thought, well, in my capacity as the director of Ivey Publishing, I realized that, these guys are never going to be able to afford what it would normally cost for use of a case. And I had earlier tried, put on a special price for emerging markets instead of the usual $3 or $4 a copy per student for each case, try $1 each. But even that was just too much. So then I just decided that what would make the most sense is just let them use it for free, because there was never going to be a sale, and why would we keep it from them? So, we put in a process that allowed people to register with us, and they have to commit to not personally sharing it with 1,000 strangers in other countries, but to use it for their own purposes, and it took off from there, so that we started to gain more and more people registering for use of the cases with their students, and it's, as I say, it's grown now to a much larger number.
So the problem you're solving is you're providing high quality business education, international business educational content for people in the 39 poorest countries in the world at no cost. And you're trying to help level the playing field of education.
Yeah.
So the 39 Country Initiative was founded in 2010. And it sounds like as you traveled the world and you saw this problem over and over again, you decided in your mind you needed to do something about it. But was there a tipping point where you just came home from one country and just said, enough? Like what brought it all together for you?
Been involved, from the time I was young, with my parents involved in collecting material, and our parish in London, Ontario, collecting material for shipments. And I had some sense of how to do this. And this may sound unbelievable, I used to run, for a short period, a small import business out of Afghanistan. I was importing hand-woven carpets. So I had some experience with shipping there. But on the case side, it was just the sense of, this is absurd. Why are we even thinking about this? Let's just do it. So I spoke to my dean of the day, who was instantly supportive. Yeah, of course. Like, why wait? There's no reason to wait with the case distribution side of this. So we started. And I don't know if there was, a particular tipping point, but it had been brewing for a while.
Yeah, simmering in your mind.
Yeah, indeed.
And then the time was right. I love that story. And for our listeners, taking action is such a valuable lesson, because I think many of us have ideas in our mind about how we can help improve the lives of others, and yet we don't take that action. So compliments to you for taking that action. You talked about the initial element of the strategy was to provide case content,
Right.
the Ivey case content that you already had,
Right.
free of charge.
Right.
So that was the first step of the strategy. How did the rest of the strategy develop, into what the 39 country initiative is today?
Okay. Well, one before I jump into that, one comment I would make is that it's not just international business content.
Okay.
Like, it's the entire catalog of the Ivey cases. So, this is 8,000 products. Okay, and each case would be anywhere from 5 to 20 pages. There would be, for each case, a teaching note that only faculty members would have access to. There's Ivey Business Journal publications. There's technical notes that are like book chapters. And so there's 8,000 documents, and you could not replace this for $50 million, because I know what it cost us to develop this content. So it's a big asset, but it's across all functional areas. It's everything from marketing to finance to operations management to leadership to strategy to international business, entrepreneurship, and all kinds of electives. And that's the biggest course. Some of the cases are intro business, sort of the course that you would take, first course in university you would take. So this is intended for universities because that's an audience that I understand from my career. And, it's sort of business school to business school. Yeah, yes, there are international business cases, lots of them, but the majority are not explicitly IB. But, the people who have been most able to instantly understand what I'm trying to do have been IB. Okay, so, colleagues in the Academy of International Business, they've been supportive of us by sometimes paying the cost of the, when we get into the part 2, which I'll get to now, which is the collecting of actually hard copies of books. Sometimes they pay the container cost. Okay, but so getting to that now. So one of the comments that I would receive from some of the schools was, yeah, the cases are great, but they're sort of loose. Do you have any actual books? Could you send books? And my initial reaction is, I really don't want to, because I was trying to keep a focus on what we could do, but then seeing what happened to many people's books, I thought, well, a lot of books are getting squandered. People are, in some instances, after a course, throwing them out or taking them home to sit on a shelf for 25 years, and they're not doing anybody any good. So I thought, well, we'll try it, okay? And so at the time, I had a PhD student from Ethiopia. I said, and he was from the largest university in a country of 100 million people, okay, Addis Ababa University. And he thought, it'd be great if we could get books. All right, so you help me do it. So we started collecting books and eventually made a shipment of books. And each shipment is approximately 10 tons of educational material. It's textbooks, it's journals, it's reference books. But the textbooks are intended not to be more than about 10 or 15 years old, because they're getting too out of date at that point. And we, out of respect for the people there, we want them to have current teaching material. So we sent the first container and to Addis Ababa. And they got it, and they told me that the entire university collection, when it arrived, increased by 30% with one container. So the 10 or 12,000 books that we sent. And that's how desperate the need is for books, something that we take for granted,
Yes.
but others don't take for granted at all.
Yes, that's incredible. And you reminded me, I have some very old textbooks sitting at home in a box in the basement. So, good point. So the strategy started with cases. It evolved into books. Tell us about the challenges, the obstacles that you encountered along the way, your original assumptions, which ones held true, which ones were proved false.
Yeah, so certainly the one that has held true is that the content makes a big difference. And again, that may just sound trite or obvious, but it's not, because we take for granted having good content. You know, we have so much access to high quality information and textbooks, and people in the poorest countries, I mean, they take turns reading the assignment in the library. They don't have a book. Each student doesn't have a book to take home, okay? And there sometimes is a very small number of copies. So thought we can do better than that, and we can give them better access to content and with the cases. And we're not forcing them to use any particular case. If you don't want to use it, don't use it. Use it for whatever course you want. You decide as a faculty member which courses you're going to put it into. And, you know, so some people would say, but, you know, aren't you telling us what to do? I'm saying, no, I'm giving you an opportunity to select from 8,000 products that are used all over the world right now and developed from people all over the world, because the Ivey cases that we register between 350 and 400 new cases per year. They're from all over the world, and they go through a review process, and a number of them are from some of the 39 country initiatives. Lots of them are from poorer countries, ones that would be particularly relevant, but the faculty get to decide which ones they use. And I think that that's important. And the feedback I get is the content is great, okay? Now, in terms of frustrations, the first one that I encountered, and frankly, it is still an issue, is tracking down the universities that exist in each country and tracking down the decision makers within the business schools or the business programs in those countries. Again, this is something that we take for granted, you know, having access to information systems, you know, that everything is, you know, you can go on anybody's website and you can find all this information in seconds. Not the case, okay? That's not the reality.
Can you tell us why that is?
Poverty.
Okay.
It's just pure and simple. They don't have the money, the sophistication, because they're resource constrained in ways that, again, we can't really relate to. I'll give you an analogy. So if we think, you know, what do you get for 2,000 US per year is the normal income in a country? Well, in academia, we would often, faculty members, we would go to a conference. And there's a registration fee, there's some travel, there's some hotel, there's meals. We might spend $2,000 on one conference.
Yes.
That's somebody's entire average income for a year. So they're not going to conferences. They can't. Okay? It's like international conferences or national conferences that with those kinds of costs. It's not feasible. So similarly, having, you know, this content, it does level the playing field, but it has been a big challenge, frankly, finding all the universities and explaining this. And when people finally understand it, now then there's great take up from it, and that's been super. But it continues to be a challenge.
It sounds like even after you reach the key decision maker, there's a high degree of skepticism.
Well, in some instances, I mean, I vividly remember meeting a dean at a business school in Nairobi, and, you know, explaining the whole concept to him, and he was highly skeptical of, okay, well, what's the catch? What are you really up to? And I said, not up to anything. This is what we're offering from Ivey is what I'm explaining. And I said, I don't know how to convince you otherwise. And I said, well, I know the provost at another university here in Nairobi. Do you know this guy? He said, oh yeah. I said, give him a call, because I'm going to be meeting somebody else for lunch, and tell me let's see if you can reach him. So that person he called said, no, Paul's not lying. There is no catch. Okay, he's made the same offer to our institution, and we're taking him up on it because we know we can trust that this is not a misstatement or anything else. So that guy, when he came back after lunch, it was like my new brother, and he was delighted because he said, I'm now going to be able to save so much money on purchasing material that I'll be able to hire 3 new faculty members from what I save. So this is great. And so, again, I know that the content, which is this huge quantity, it works. So that part is great. But again, it's been a challenge, and it continues to be a challenge because you get a lot of private universities starting up, and a lot of the websites are just not what we're accustomed to. So we've been experimenting with ways to try to reach people, and we haven't got it puzzled out yet. We're still plugging away at this one to try to, in some countries, word of mouth takes over and then it's fine. Suddenly you've got, 50 or 60 universities in a country, that are registered. In others, it's been slower.
Interesting. So you mentioned the internet.
Yeah.
Assume one of your original assumptions involved the internet. Isn't the internet and access to the internet supposed to make it easier for all of us to have access to content around the world?
Sure. But again, it assumes a couple of things on infrastructure that you can't assume. So one of the things that instantly became an issue that I had not envisioned is the size of a file. Okay? And in many countries, you're constrained on how big a file you can open. And we have lots of cases that might have a couple of photographs in them. They couldn't open it. So even if we had wanted to distribute this electronically, which was our first, this would be the easiest way. But again, that assumes everybody's got a laptop or a phone, and you cannot assume that.
Right.
Okay? It would be nice to assume that, because this would make things far simpler, but it's not the reality. And one of the things that I learned early on in visiting these universities is, assumptions we would make about the fact that, the lights always be on. Well, there's power outages constantly in many institutions because they're poor.
Right.
So, again, what we take for granted, you can't take for granted.
Right. Yeah. Good story. Good examples. What other assumptions, which would you make early on that have been an issue or also could have been maybe you were pleasantly surprised?
Yeah, well, so when we started doing the shipments of the books, it's great that St. Louis has done its first one already, and we've done a number of them from Ivey, and often there, what we figured out that if we're going to do this in a more expeditious fashion, we get some schools that would serve as a collection node. So within Southern Ontario, and Ontario's got a big population, there's a bunch of universities around. So I, made some calls to neighboring ones and said, can you guys collect some books? We'll get them down to us, and then we'll put them all together and ship that. And that seems to be a very effective way to make more shipments. One of the things I was surprised about is just, it seems there's always an issue with storage space. And this never seems to get better all over the world. It just seems no matter how much storage space you've got, somebody else wants to fill it with something else. So what's important is that the leadership of the university says this matters. Okay, so don't instantly give away all the storage space. Now, the reality is we don't need a huge amount of storage space. I mean, if you look at the standard shipping container, it's 20 feet by 8 feet by 8 feet. And we never get up to the height because that's too much on the pallet. So it's closer to 20 feet deep, 8 feet wide, and 6 feet high. That's what we need for a container. Well, there's got to be a way in a university you can find a safe, dry place somewhere for this content so that we can keep doing what we do.
Because I assume it takes a while to collect the books, to get them into the container. And then I think there's also a specific way they have to be packed and packaged. I mean, maybe you could talk more about that as well.
There's all kinds of ways of packing them, but most of them are going to be a problem if you're not careful. So it's really useful to use standard size boxes. So typically 2 cubic feet, the size of a standard photocopy paper box, with a lid, And if you do that, you're going to be able to fit them on the pallets. And the pallets are 4 to 8 inches, 4 feet by 40 inches, and you can fit then 10 onto a container. That'll be 10 tons. And if you try to do anything different, you're looking for problems, because if you don't use the same size boxes, then they start breaking, and then you've got a big mess, and you can't load the containers because you need to be able to, when the truck shows up, the guy shows up with the truck and the container that's going to be going, you need to do this loading in a matter of a couple hours. And so if everything is on the right size pallet, and the pallets need to be heat treated, that's a regulation in 130 countries. It's got this little symbol on it. Otherwise, it's useless to us because it can be turned back if they want, if it doesn't have the heat treat symbol on it. But it's got that, it's the right size, and it's consistent size boxes that are all filled but not overfilled and not underfilled, then they're not going to be breaking. Okay? And then you shrink wrap these things and it's fine. Okay? But anything else, you're looking for trouble.
It sounds like it requires quite a bit of preparation, a meticulous, rigorous process to make sure that it all goes
and the good news is that at most schools, there's a bunch of students who are happy to help. Okay? And so, we have used at different times, I'll put out a call, to one of my colleagues, maybe I'm not teaching that at that time, can you find half a dozen students to give me 2 or 3 hours? And they just show up. Okay, and it's great. The students are fantastic at helping out, so that they're not the constraint on this. And and they work like crazy to try to move things along. Sometimes we're frustrated if people give us less than current content, or give us books that are things that are not appropriate. So some stuff. We've had people give us textbooks that were 50 years old. Well, there's no market value for that. Okay, there's no point shipping it. Okay, like it's in one way, it's like an insult. So we don't ship it. Okay, and sometimes we get books and we go, well, these are not garbage, but we'll give them to a thrift store or something else that maybe they can sell them. But we, it's a bit frustrating sometimes if people give you stuff and, we do a quick check and realize, that 25% of it is stuff that we can't ship. We're not going to ship. So that can save us time if.
Exactly. Who handles the logistics of getting, let's say we collect another container of books here at St. Louis University, and then we're going to ship it. I believe the first one went to Pakistan.
Right.
Who handled the logistics? Who pays the freight? How does that work?
So the shipping company, thankfully, they have all kinds of experience with this. So there's a form or a set of forms. You've done it already here, so it's going to be a whole lot easier the next time through.
Sure.
The shipping companies, the prices, I think, for shipping 10 tons of content are incredibly competitive. So, we had a shipment that just from Ivey that just arrived Monday at the port of Chittagong in Bangladesh, and that container. They picked it up in London, Ontario, okay, and then put it on the first boat in Toronto, the port of Toronto, and the total cost of that to get it to the other port, which is where ownership changes, was just slightly over $4,000, which to me is not a huge amount of money.
Sounds very
for the quantity of teaching material, the volume that you're sending.
So the strategy today is about continuing down the road of providing cases, continuing down the road of collecting books and, I guess, analog physical content, primarily books, and with containers. How do you see the strategy evolving into the future?
Well, one of the things that I'm trying to do now that I had not placed enough attention on earlier is French language content, because about a third of the original countries in the 39 country initiative, which is actually now up to, sadly, 45 countries, because countries have gotten poorer, and you have to have some cutoff point. And so there's now 45 countries, and about a third of them are Francophone, mostly in Africa, but, also like Haiti. And so I'm trying to figure out a way to get more cases translated into French. Ideally paying somebody in Francophone Africa to do the translation. And I'm in the middle of trying to, with a colleague who's from Benin, who first language, of course, is French. He's been helping significantly here, but trying to see if we can get more of the cases, at least, into French. Where I'm not collecting at Ivey French language books. It would, you'd have to be doing that in Quebec or in France or someplace too. But at least having more cases into the first language of the recipient.
Of the 8,000 cases that Ivey has, how many would you estimate are in French language?
Only about 300.
Really?
Yeah. So, we're an officially bilingual country, so we should have more. I'm working on it.
Okay.
We've translated cases into many different languages, or people have supplied translations. And then you do a quality control check, and some of them aren't so good. And then in some instances, it doesn't matter who translates, somebody complains. Okay. Right. And, I'm not good enough in these other languages to say, that's a great translation or a so-so translation. But, so we rely on others to verify. And so we want to just have high quality translations. And there's absolutely people in Francophone Africa who can do a high quality translation, but we're trying to track people down to do it and trying to find more funding to get more cases into French. And with the idea that it would be the people there who would tell us which cases should be translated. Yes. Most faculty members, even in Francophone countries, a significant portion of the literature they would have read as part of their training would have been in English. So a lot of them can read English just fine. So the idea would be they tell us which cases they want translated, and we see if we can find the resources to get a good quality translation done. Yeah.
One of the things I really like about what I'm learning about the 39 country initiative is you really do listen to your audience, the people that you're trying to provide this content to. You really are listening to them instead of you just saying, here, we're going to shove this onto you. You're trying to say, hey, our library is open. How would you like us to deliver it to you? What is the best way we can deliver it to you? And I think that's a fundamental business principle that works all around the world. So it's just interesting to hear that it works so well for you in this context.
Well, I don't see any other alternative because I'm not trying to force anything down anybody's throat.
Right.
Okay. This is an opportunity.
Right.
Okay. And, things like container shipments. I mean, everybody wants a container shipment. Like
Sure.
Every institution. And, so we have to say no to a lot of places. So, our objective is to try to make sure that ultimately there's at least one institution in each country that's got a really good library. That got a container shipment.
You said a couple things earlier, and I'm not sure we covered them early on. So tell us about, going back to the beginning, how did you decide that it should be $2,000, the cutoff should be $2,000 per capita income? And then did that translate into 39 countries? Could you tell us more?
There's no magic number. Okay. In some of the early literatures, the definitions that are used for developing countries and least developed countries, these are not my definitions. There are others. You'd see a number like 2,000 sometimes. So I thought, we've got to start somewhere. And I don't want to do this in a way that the dean will turn around and say, you're giving away too many cases for free to places that could actually afford to. So I thought, we'll keep this unambiguous, unequivocal. Okay, like nobody's going to argue that $2,000 a year average income is pretty poor.
Yes.
Okay, and nobody has. Okay, one could make an argument that it should be larger than that. Okay, and we may get to that point, but we're not there yet because we're busy enough already with the three existing legs of this.
Yeah. Paul, if our listeners would like to help assist the 39 country initiative, how would you recommend that they do that?
Well, it depends on which listeners, what they are. So I would say for everyone, if you know someone in these countries, tell them about this. Because at a minimum, those universities can use the teaching content for free. And some people say, well, I don't know anybody in the business school. I know somebody in the engineering school, and I'll say, or in the medical school. And my reaction is, out of the 8,000 products in the Ivey collection, hundreds deal with engineering. So there's cases they can use too. Okay?
Okay.
There's at least 500 cases that deal with healthcare in some form or other. So again, other units at a university can use this. So just the word of mouth from anyone would be helpful. Okay. So that would apply to everyone.
Yes.
No matter, for the students, it's great if they donate books. They're going to find a really good home. Okay. There are other organizations that collect books. Some of those, though, what they do, and they don't tell you at the time, is they actually sell the most recent ones to cover the costs of their business. Okay, so the books they end up shipping are never the most recent version. Okay, and so just to be aware. But making content available, great. Helping with shipments, fantastic. For those who may have more resources, paying for a copy or copies of cases to be translated into French. We can put an acknowledgement line on the case, made possible through a donation from, if desired. Sure. But all of that would be helpful.
On average, could you give us a ballpark number about how much it might cost to translate a case into French?
Less than $1,000. Okay, so this is not a huge amount of money. And, cases are often used for 10 or 15 years. So, and they'd be reaching students in 15 countries. Okay, for $1,000 in all the business schools who want to sign up in 15 countries. So So you can have a lot of impact for a little bit of money. But
Absolutely.
And then, if there's organizations with larger interests, I mean, one of the things that some schools have said is, could we actually publish a set of the cases in a book format where in the country, it might be a set of cases on entrepreneurship or finance, but like them selecting the ones that they want to put in a book. If we had, and a number of the books that I've done over the years have been books that are case collections that were sold in China, for example. And so we know how to do this. You can publish a book with a bunch of cases and distribute it, the whole thing, for less than $10 a copy.
Okay.
And so one opportunity would be, if somebody would be able to fund, print runs of 500 or 1,000 copies, we could be reaching a lot of universities. And having all of this content collected, packaged, that makes it even easier for the libraries to distribute and the faculty to distribute. And again, the cases that they select would be the ones they select. This is not, again, would not be somebody in London, Ontario, or in St. Louis forcing it down somebody's throat. It's saying, you tell us what you want to do. It's your course.
Right.
Okay? It's your program.
Right.
And that would be great, because the reality, and that, comes back to one of our earlier points. We take books for granted.
Yes.
And they don't, because many people there, they've never owned a book.
Yeah.
Because it's a luxury. Okay? And so if we actually had the ability to have, send 15 or 20 copies to each of the business schools in a particular country or multiple countries, that would be reaching a lot more people. And of course, and we've done stuff like this in other countries. We put a donor page from ABC Corporation or whatever it is, acknowledging their financial support to make this possible. Happy to do stuff like that. But that would be a way to take it to another level, like package together what they think is exactly what they need for their country or for their country and a neighboring one. And put it into book format, because it's doable now.
Interesting. So to recap, sounds like the easiest way is if someone knows someone listening to this podcast knows someone in any of these 39 countries.
Send them a link to your podcast.
Yeah, we'll make sure that the links get set up, the show notes are set up. Should we have them contact the Ivey Business School? We'll figure that out offline. But that would be maybe the easiest way.
There's
no cost to that. Right?
So word of mouth is great.
Right. The more people understand what you're doing, the more support you
absolutely
get. The second way could be, if you're so inclined, support the translation of a case into French, which sounds like it could be done for less than $1,000 US.
Yep.
So maybe there's 10 people out there that would like to throw in and do that as a group. Who knows? There's probably many ways to figure that out. And then the third way could be if a business school in one of the 39 countries, or a school, maybe quit calling it a business school, but they would like to customize their own content in the form of a book. That would be another way as well.
And so getting some financial support to make that happen.
So some type of sponsorship or grant or some sort of funding that would help make that.
So stuff like that would be super.
Yeah.
But there's lots of ways to help. And students just helping collect and sort boxes. They're fantastic.
Another great idea. And you'd mentioned impact, and this does matter. When we talked earlier off camera, I believe you told me that in these 39 countries, there's over 1 billion people living in these 39 countries.
Yeah. So we're targeting the people in the poorest countries in the world.
Right.
And we're targeting the university level,
Right.
the business school within the university, the business department, because that's what I work in a business school. That's what I know best. Mm-hmm. So reaching them, my counterparts who, for whatever reason, didn't have the opportunities that I had or you had, mm-hmm. okay? And trying to just, give them a leg up on education, basic, what we take for granted.
Right.
Just see if we can do a little bit to help them along.
Right. You're just extending a hand and trying to help them up.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really appreciate that. So this feels like a place where we could begin to bring it to a close and conclude our podcast episode. So is there anything else that you would like our audience to know about the 39 Country Initiative? Another message that you would like them to hear, something that we have not covered?
The only thing I can assure people is that, there's lots of charitable work out there that people are doing, initiatives people are helping. There's nobody taking any money for private purposes or, like anything we get, we distribute. We get help from our own institution to make things happen. Whatever you help with, you can be sure if you provided money to translate a case into French, you can be sure all of it would be spent on translating a case into French, for example.
Yeah. Paul, thank you for giving us your time today, your presence, sharing this incredible, inspiring story of the 39 Country Initiative. I'm confident that some of our audience are going to be touched by your words today and will somehow find their way to you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Much appreciated.
Yeah. To our listeners, we hope you've enjoyed our conversation with Dr. Paul Beamish as we discussed the 39 Country Initiative and everything the program does for those in need. If you learned something from the podcast and you're so inspired, please leave us a review. I would also encourage you to share this episode with others who may be interested in the 39 Country Initiative. Join us next time as we continue to explore global market strategies. I'm your host, Todd Hovermale, bringing you conversations that matter.
Thank you for tuning in to the SLU International Business Now Conversations That Matter podcast.